Paul, welcome to the Lead, Learn, Grow podcast.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so good to catch up with you. I said during the intro that you and I have been friends for must be close to a decade now. And
Yeah, I
and
think
I'm
around 2013,
yeah,
around
yeah.
then. Yeah,
Yeah, so I'm really anxious. You and I haven't caught up in depth about your new venture. So maybe we'll start there. So as I mentioned in the intro, before you and I started recording here, you've got a long history of working with some great institutions and helping in the area of fundraising and gifts and campaigns and that whole world in higher ed. And then you took that, you went out and independently started a company where you did consulting and working with folks in the same manner. But now it feels like a shift. And so the last I heard from you, you were working with this startup higher ed directed product that was AI driven. So tell us a little bit about the new venture, but then I'd also like to hear, how did that unfold? Like how did you come to the idea? What led to that?
sure, absolutely. And thanks again for having me on. A lot of this started, I've been in higher education for about 35 years. I've been a vice president at 4 stops along the way. Primarily on the advancement side of the aisle, a little bit of admissions. When we worked together, it really opened up my eyes to see the full journey that a student takes in higher education, not just from one single perspective. Higher education tends to be very siloed. So it got me started thinking down a path of how admissions ties in with what advancement does. And so from that, I kind of developed this theory called behavioral chain philanthropy. What happens over in admissions is very relevant to what happens in advancement a few years later. So long story short, I wanted to understand and let people know that, there was this window, a 6-year window, essentially, that a student begins to work with the university, raises their hand, takes an action, and then how do you work with that? How do you improve the journey? How do you do all that? That's kind of where the whole process for the company that we founded called Oblio, which is what we call an AI inbox tool, right? And it's different from what other tools you use to increase enrollment because there's nothing new to learn. There's no new systems. You don't have to switch your CRMs. We're CRM agnostic. You don't have to deal with complicated dashboards, multiple platforms. Everything takes place within your email inbox. So it really simplifies it for everybody. We have a lot of different things. And so I took what I had been doing from the advancement side of things. And when I went into my, my advancement consulting business, which I'm very proud to also say that I was the only counsel on the only billion dollar campaign in liberal arts college history that recently concluded out here in Southern California last year. So
And that was with to interrupt you, that was with Claremont McKenna, right?
yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it was a wonderful experience, great people. They did an amazing job. I'm very proud of the work, all of the pre-work that I did to help them get prepared to do that. But it also made me start to think about, is this what I wanted to do long term? Do I want to stay in this consulting? Because I had so much going on. And then, I had a life-altering moment that made me start to rethink things. And so from that, I was like, all right, now's really the time to start working more over on the advancement side. Of course, our roadmap is such that eventually we're going to move to all elements of higher education and introduce Oblio to this. But that's really kind of how it all unfolded, and I'm not sure if you'd call it unraveled, but it unfolded anyway in that particular manner.
Yeah. So was there like what was the spark that led to the moment where this idea started to become something, tangible?
Well, quite honestly, you may not know it, but you were involved.
Hmm. Tell me more.
I had, from an advancement perspective, I understood and really worked with the emotional intelligence side of what we do.
Mhm.
From how you approach sales and how you approach all of these types of things, I refer to that as structural intelligence.
Mhm.
And when you came and did some work out there as well, um, I loved it, and I was like, that's perfect. And then along came artificial intelligence. I was like, that's the missing link. That's what's going to make all of this work. So the emotional intelligence, the structural intelligence, and the artificial intelligence. And then it was just kind of a eureka moment. And then, I had wanted to, I think every kid belongs at an institution. I really do believe that. And I think there's an institution for every kid. And helping higher education, or helping as much as I possibly can, was important to me. And so I started thinking, how do we do this? How do we put this together? And fortunately, my two co-founders, who I'd known one for a while, Walter Rivera, he's been 10 years in ed tech. He's been in through a few startups. He said, well, what we need is a really great engineer. And then shortly thereafter, a gentleman he went to high school with, an old friend of his, who was a Google engineer, a 23andMe engineer, and a Samsara engineer through his career. He's amazing. We all three got together. And so, and that we kind of formed this, we put it together. We've actually been going at it now for about 8 months. And we have already 11 partners. People are kind of astounded that we are able to move through higher education that quickly. And I think it's because we have such a unique combination, and we all have familiarities with a little bit of higher ed, no higher ed, but engineering, and we blend really well together. And so as a team, we really work well. And so, and we kind of take the team approach in almost everything that we do, because we know that we can kind of bounce off of each other. I've been in higher ed forever. Walter understands the ed tech startup, and Oscar is, an amazing engineer. So that's kind of how it all packaged together. But yeah, you have a little responsibility in this.
Outstanding, outstanding. Who
And no
knew? Who
residuals
knew?
for you, though.
Yeah, no residuals, but story of my life, Paul. But no, that's really fascinating, and I do some of this journey. I do recall, hearing you talk about, and probably at a time when you were just trying to put it all together and
Right.
describe and make sense of it. So you said you've already got 11 partners, and by
Yes.
partners, you're talking about institutions that are using the product?
Yes. Almost all of them are launched at this point.
Wow.
It's funny. Those are some of the struggles that we deal with. Are we talked about this a little bit earlier. The of trying to do everything. Right now, there's three of us. We're in the hiring process. We need, people who can onboard. We need people who are engineers. We need more. So we're doing that whole thing that startups do, as we start to approach people for financing and things like that. And we need more people, but we're trying to do everything. And so, before this conversation, we've been involved in two accelerators. We were accepted into two. One was Techstars at San Diego, powered by San Diego State University, which was amazing. They're the largest seed accelerator, I believe, in the world. And just recently, we're still technically going through it, but AWS, the Amazon Web Services, we were also selected in their first cohort. And so very exciting. We're the only company that was in both. And there were only a total of, I think, 29 companies, and there were a few thousand worldwide applications. So we're very excited. They look at us as a very unique package. I'm the old guy, and these two are like half my age. And so, but we work really well together, and it's exciting. So
What what have you learned in this journey of, like, this is like pure entrepreneurship, and
it
what's
is.
been something that you would say has been your biggest learning?
What's really different is someone my age. I was brought up in an educational system, an environment that was very different than the way entrepreneurial. My grandfather was an amazing entrepreneur. You know, in the early days, he owned a trucking company, a car dealership, and a gas station. So he was a supply chain guy, and this is like early 1900s when he started this, and he did amazing. It doesn't work that way anymore. You know, it's very different. Having to learn almost an entire new language, especially on the technical side of things. I'd be, you know, these guys are talking, and I'd have to be, wait a minute, stop. What does that mean? Right. And so I'd be scratching my head and said, so why do I have an MBA? This is so different. Uh, and so, you know, there was a big learning curve, and the guys have been great because they're like, we get it, right? You know, I'm like, you want to switch to what particular software package? You know, I'm used to Lotus 1, 2, 3, right? Yeah, I'm just joking about that, but you know, and kind of that coming up to speed, and you know, they're using a million different things. You know, they were raised on technology, right? You know, someone my age, we had to adapt to it as best we could, and it's constantly changing. So they view it very differently than I do. And so, you know, they're patient with me. And so, which is, it's something you have to kind of relearn. You know, it's not like TV where you walk in and you're like, I have a great idea. Let's make $1 billion. And you walk out and you're living somewhere, you know, magical. So I would say that that's been the biggest issue. And for me, anyway, I wouldn't call it an issue, but I'd say it's really different.
Yeah. Yeah. What, so of the, like, it feels remarkably fast to have that many
Yeah.
client partners already. What is it that, what is it that your product does, or maybe let me ask it this way, what problem is it solving for
Right.
these admissions professionals?
The biggest problem, you know, in admissions that is, you know, as we see it, is there's this massive outreach that takes place, you know, throughout the funnel. And, you know, historically, people have used direct mail, you know, traditional aspects like that. It's expensive. It's big, it's cumbersome. You know, you have, and then you get to the point where you've spent all of this money, invested all of this time. And so, and then you try to narrow down a group that's going to be most likely to enroll, right? You use a lot of data to kind of get there. And that's about 20% of your population of people who have applied. What we're saying is allow us to take care of the other 80%, or let us have, access to them. And we can write hyper-personalized personal communications. So we're using the AI to basically, that might read your essay. You know, when our kids applied, they wrote an essay. It'll summarize the essay so someone can reach out and say, seen the essay, yeah, let's save the world together. Whatever response it is to that with other personalized information, that is a non-marketing. It's not part of a drip campaign. It's not part of anything like that. It's like an email from Robin Green to me. What our initial partners are finding is they're getting thank you notes. Thank you. I really appreciate the kind words about my essay. I'm really looking forward. We have people using it in different things. We have one institution that's using it as kind of, for lack of a better term, kind of chumming the waters with a group of students before they've been accepted, right? They have a good idea that they probably will be, but they want to start. And the bottom line is to increase the yield. Because we know at the end of the day, no matter what, if we can increase your yield by even just a small percentage, that can mean millions of dollars to an institution. That can be a game changer. You know, their whole landscape might change because they've got a 2% increase in yield. That can save an institution, right? We're getting ready for a demographic cliff. We're getting ready for a lot of things, and that's not going to end immediately. It's not over in 2025.
Right.
It's going to be there for a few years. And who's going to survive? Who's going to invest? And, you know, the technology is there. It's already being used. We're seeing some really great results, immediate results. You know, we have another institution that's using it. They're getting deposits without ever even giving financial aid yet because of the FAFSA being so late. People are like, yeah, I'm on board. You know, and so it's that personal communication that people are responding to and students. It's the one big thing we believe that's always been missing in higher education, personal communication, because it's and it's also, it's very, it's unique, it's different. We're also running some surveys and having some testing done to find new channels of communication, where the students are. We want to meet them there. We also want to talk to them personally. If one of your kids got a personal note from a place that they may or may not be interested in seeing, not a big branded, email that they know everybody else gets, right? They get a personal email from whomever. That's the other beauty of it, is that it's, because it's so simple, we have deans, we have admissions people, we have vice presidents, we have a president, we have many people who are using it, and it's flexible. If you have the data that we can incorporate into helping you create a personalized, outreach, that's how we do it. And then you don't have anything else to worry about, right? You don't have to sign on, you don't have to try to do this, and it records the data back into whatever particular CRM you're using, because we're CRM agnostic.
Yeah, and it feels like it'll be really interesting in, when some of these students who are captured through this hyper personalization, when they become students, right? Will they retain at higher levels? Because,
Right.
it's just like, sometimes like in a sales organization, the way you treat people in the selling process is a proxy for what it's going to be like when they're a client. And I think probably the same thing would apply, at least
Right.
seems like it would. And then to your point, where you're talking about, cradle to grave kind of stuff, but
Yep.
like, then will these students give at higher rates because they feel
Exactly.
like the college knows them, they feel like there's a personal connection? Like, it's
Right.
really, really interesting.
Well, if you can improve the journey, right, and from the start, having personal communications, and again, I want to emphasize the importance of us not being beholden to any particular CRM. Whatever
Yeah.
you want to use is fine with us. The data and what Oblio can do is it goes over the top of these, so the data can be transferred. So it can go through student life. And if you're in student life or student experience, as I like to refer to it as, if you're happy, you're healthy, the institution's been helpful, maybe you were going to have a financial aid issue and the school was able to head it off and have a conversation and fix it for you. You're not angry when you graduate for 5 years, right? So you do roll over and you're more of a champion for the institution at the end of the day. And the champions are where more of your donors come from. There's champions, there's friends, and there's acquaintances, right? Champions love you. They're always going to be there for you. They wear your hats, your sweatshirts, your anything. Your friends, they love you too, but they have a lot of other interests, etc. You're not first in line or first on their mind. And then the acquaintances, very transactional. They came, they did what they needed to do, and then they left. They have really no interest. And so if you can create more champions and maybe take a few of the acquaintances and make them more friends, you're doing something not only at the front of your institution by the admissions yield increasing, you're also helping create better, more informed, more engaged potential donors and alumni.
Yeah.
So why not?
Yeah, and I think about, and I know a lot of the people that are listening to this, or the typical tribe, aren't in higher education. And I think something Paul is talking about is very transferable to thinking about recruiting, hiring, selecting, and retaining staff. Too many times we woo people to come to work for us, and then that's sort of where it ends. They just become a soldier, and we don't do ongoing coaching meetings. And one of the things that I talk about a lot is, the magic in leadership is, if I can find out what my team members' goals are, if I can find out what your goals are, and then I can align them to my goals, now we've got a real partnership. We're on the same page. But too many organizations, they never bother to find out, to get personal enough to find out, hey, Paul, what are you hoping to accomplish in this role? And what are some of your ambitions? And so one of the keys to being a great leader, I think, are aligning personal goals with corporate goals. And when you can do that, boy, that's magic. And there's a strong element to that in what you're speaking on now, I think.
100%. I used to tell whenever I had kind of new staff member along the way or something like that, and so much so that my amazing wife has also stolen this and she uses it for her staff. It's a story, and I picked it up from a woman who was running advancement at the National Cathedral years ago. She said the minister was out walking by, and there are two guys working on a wall, on part of the repairs of the wall. And he stopped and he asked the first guy, "What are you doing?" Right? And he said, "Oh, I'm just fixing the wall. I've got some mortar, I got some bricks, I'm doing all that stuff." And he's like, "Oh, that's interesting." And he asked the second guy, "So what are you doing?" He said, "I'm building a cathedral."
Mm.
And I think that I always love that story. I don't know if it's true or not, but I think it tells you, a lot about the particular individual and the importance. Is it a job or is this something more?
Yeah.
Right? Because there are lots of jobs. There
Yeah.
are very few things to where, you can really get things out of. At the end of the day, if I can get, I'm never going to cure a disease or build another Eiffel Tower or whatever it may be. But if I could help educate a kid who does, by getting into the right institution at the right time with the right financial aid, with the right this and that, if we can create a better society through helping to educate kids, I'm all in.
Yeah.
And I think that's, to further what you're saying, I think
Yeah,
that's
for sure. For sure. I mean, it really is a worthy mission. And you think about it, and now you don't have to say this. So this is me, not Paul, saying this. I want everybody to hear, but most colleges and, institutions, they're not very good at being timely and being responsive and go look at a college website and you just want to, it's like everything we think someone might ever need to know someday in the future, and every question, like, let's just make it so cluttered and like, so I'm a little cynical about it, but and again, that's me and not Paul speaking, but it really does, like, it starts to paint a picture of what you're talking about, where we can take this group of students and we're responsive, we're hyper personal. It's not a generic form letter. It's not, something that thousands of other people are getting. It's not a
right.
marketing slick. And that's what appeals to people. That's what
Sure.
engages people. And so it really, and I think you're coming along with this, Paul, at a really good time,
Yeah.
because I know I've been out of it for many years, but it's got to be hard for certain kinds of institutions to meet their enrollment goals every year.
Oh, it is. And it's getting tougher.
Yeah.
There are some institutions, big institutions that, have great brand. And, out here in California, the UC systems, I mean,
Right.
Cal Berkeley, UCLA, University of California, Irvine, they all have like record numbers of applications. Well, they're not going to take any more students. And that's because a few years ago, about 6, 7 years ago, the state of California said you have to take more in-state students. A little bit of what Virginia was telling UVA and William and Mary, you can't keep taking everybody from the Northeast. You got to take more Virginia students. Well, they cracked down hard out here, but because of that, everybody's applying. And so, and most of them still are not getting in. It just kind of, it's a way to kind of move people through the process to maybe end up at UC Riverside or somewhere else like that. So they fill all of the institutions. That's all wonderful and good, and I appreciate that. But it hurts the smaller institutions, the private institutions, because they one of the institutions a few years ago ran a program where they wanted to try to see who they could attract, give them admissions, but not allow them on campus. I won't use the university's name, And I think it was more of a test. They wanted to see if they got 500 students. And I'm like, you understand, that's an entire class at a private institution. And they were kind of disappointed with their numbers, but they couldn't set foot on campus for a year. They could only do online work.
Hmm.
But because they wanted to get into a UC system and they wanted to do this stuff, they picked up 500 kids. Now that wipes out every other, Southern California private institution class,
Yeah.
so they have to scramble and do things. It kind of has this cascading effect.
Yeah.
And I truly do believe that, there's an institution for every kid. And the
Yeah.
more that we can help either, revitalize themselves, get stronger, again, historically, higher ed's been somewhat risk adverse. And I think most people would admit to that. They can't be anymore.
Yeah.
Those days are kind of over. They've got to be creative. They've got to be thoughtful. They've got to be assertive,
Yes.
right? And, I think, what we have here and what we've created is amazing. If you're getting a thank you note, students reaching back out to you to thank you, and they're responding. One other quick interesting data point is that we've noticed there was one institution that was working with the state that they're in to try to keep more of a nursing cohort that comes from out of state to stay in the state.
Mm-hmm.
Their initial numbers were 90% said they would stay. And we're trying to develop and kind of, flesh out that data as to why is that? Is it because the personalization, they feel more comfortable coming to an institution, even though they're out of state, because of that personal touch?
Mm-hmm.
Information came from the dean, personal email, and it was like, wow. So we were even surprised. So we're still discovering interesting things and interesting behavior all along the way.
Yeah, and it's the little things. As you're talking, I'm thinking about, we were talking before we started recording, catching up on kids and things like that. And I was telling you about, Casey applying to law school, and of course,
Right.
Austin, your son, is in law school. So we were talking about that. But, as you're talking about this, something that was like really, really stood out is Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it was after he took the LSAT, or maybe he had applied to Michigan. I think he did apply to Michigan. But he gets a note from the dean of the law school at Michigan, probably like mass produced. There's 80,000, stacks of paper that they send out, no personal, but somebody, presumably her, wrote a little note in a blue felt tip marker at the bottom. And
Yeah.
here's all it said: "We love William and Mary students." That's all it said. So all of a sudden, Michigan goes from like 11 to 3 on his
Yeah.
list. And so it really
Yeah.
is. I mean, people just want to like not be another face in the crowd.
Yeah. Well,
And
when you really think about it, Robin, from your own college experience, it's the people who you meet along the way. It's your friends, it's all of those things, and that's amazing. But it's your work study supervisor who was like, hey, go ahead, take an extra hour off, go do your study, right? You got a big test tomorrow. It's the people that you connect. I don't know what you'd refer to them as. They're kind of like these almost like invisible mentors,
yeah,
right? They make such and have such an impact on you as a student. If it weren't for that guy, I remember I was the student supervisor of officials, made me a basketball official. And I was like, you don't know what you're doing, because I call nothing, right? Right. But I remember it as like, I needed a little job and I needed this. And he's like, yeah, come on. He goes, I can use you. And it's like, awesome, right? And so there are so many of those people along your way. And and we don't take advantage of that, and we don't use that enhances the relationship with the institution and the student.
yeah, for
And so
sure.
let's start that early. Let's start
Yeah,
that when they're a sophomore in high school and they've taken the PSAT and they say, oh, send me some info. 100% I'll send you some info, and let's have a conversation.
yeah.
It's about relationships at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's so good. And I think about too in the business world, again, just sort of taking some of this and overlaying it in a way that business owners may take something more from it. It makes me think of this, like motivation. right? So one of the things that organizations do, and you know, education, business, whatever, and Paul, you've sat through many of them, is like, hey, we got the team together, we've got the meeting, we're going to go out to Ruth Chris's, we're going to have a 5-course meal, and it's going to be amazing. People are going to love it, and they're going to know we appreciate them. And what
Yeah.
they don't realize is 40% of the crowd are moaning and like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. I just want to go and I don't like to do that. It takes too long. I don't, you know, on and on. When in reality, if I knew Paul's favorite candy bar was a Reese's cup,
Yeah.
and I just bought a little pack of Reese's cups and set one on his desk and said, hey, Paul, I thought you would like this. And Paul raves about it. He calls home and says, you're not going to believe it. The boss left me some Reese's. And it's like, it's not, it like motivation. I guess the point is motivation is really, really personal, and
Yeah.
compelling people and engaging people is, it really is hyper personal. And so anywhere we can make something more personal, we're going to get greater engagement. So I love that. Well,
100%.
Paul, you're doing good stuff. I'm really proud of you, and
Thank you.
really happy I inspired you. Yeah, see how I took that? When you said, yeah,
Absolutely.
you might have had a
Take
little
all that credit.
something, maybe just a, no, no, I'm glad I gave you the idea, Paul. You're welcome. But no, but I want to shift and talk a little more about you, because
Sure.
I've known you for years, and you're a really interesting, you've got a lot of interesting experiences, and you've seen some things.
Yeah.
And I know 3 years ago, almost to the date, you were reminding me, you had quite a health scare where you had like emergency open heart surgery, and you're on the
Did.
walking trail, if I recall. And
Yep.
I think Sherry found you, and just all of that. What's changed with your mindset? What's different in your life having had that experience?
Well, I tell you, you're 100% accurate. Actually, my wife was walking with me, and I
Mm,
told her I could walk it off, and I had done it a couple times before, feeling the same way. And when she actually picked me up off the trail, is when she's like, "You're done. You're going to the doctor." And she took me to the doctor immediately, and they kept me there. She wasn't allowed in because it was COVID, so she sat in the car and worked all day, stayed out there for hours, and finally they told her, go home, he's spending the night, you can come get him tomorrow. And overnight things progressed, they did more tests. Within a day, actually after that, they moved me and gave me a quadruple emergency bypass. And it was like, oh, okay. And so it was stressful, it was hard, it was tough, it was tougher on her. I just remember looking at the lights and saying to the doctors as we were going in, hey, that's just like in the movies, right? When you see the lights above you. And they're just, I always remember them chuckling. And then I woke up with all these things all over the place and everywhere else. And but what it really changed for me was, a couple things. The first thing was fear disappeared. The fear of like everyday things, like, should I do this? Should I try that? Should I do this? Just disappeared. The only thing I found myself worried about was, had I given my kids enough? Had I given them enough of whatever I knew, whatever I had to offer? That was the only thing that I had any kind of fear of. Nothing else mattered. It just seemed to all just disappear.
mm.
And so, which I thought was kind of weird and strange. My wife was amazing. I mean, she really was. Not only did she save my life, but she put up with a couple of weeks of really weird, bizarre, drug-induced things happening to me. I mean, my vision turned upside down at one point. I mean, just she'd find me at 3 o'clock in the morning, falling asleep outside watching TV with like a mug of water in my hand, and it's like, what are you doing out here? Like, I have no idea. But so I also learned the amount of how resilient of a human being she is. But what it also really changed was, like I was saying, the lack of fear. And it was kind of like, you know what? I need to do some things that I've wanted to do. when the doctor said, well, we're going to give you this surgery because we don't want to do stents, we don't want to do all that. You have a really strong, healthy heart. It's just blocked, right? And for whatever reason, they said, so we're going to do this. We want this to be a once in a lifetime event for you and be done with it. So I was like, okay. I'm not sure I understood at the time, but it seemed like a really fearless kind of decision. I was like, I don't think you're giving me much of a choice. I think you're going to do whatever it is you're going to do. And but really it was the fear disappeared. And what was it, what are the things that I want to do? What are the things that I can do? Um, and so that's kind of when this thought process started to come around. The other thing too that was interesting is I noticed, people who I had worked with for a long period of time started to step away a little bit. It's like, oh, this guy had a big surgery. Is he, is he going to be okay? Is he going to show up at my, door and is he going to drop dead over here? Right. And I assured them that no, that wasn't the case. I couldn't promise I wouldn't drop dead, but it wasn't going to be for this. So, and that kind of opened up to do some more things, try some different things, and you touched on it early on. It's different than what I was doing completely beforehand. And making that shift, doing something that I thought might be more useful and more more useful, really. I guess that's it. And that would have more of an effect on people, right? Historically, advancement is a place where, it's kind of like the end of the process, right? Everything that you get has been solidified by then. And I was like, I want to break that up. That doesn't seem right. We can affect it. We can make this better. We can do things. And thank goodness I found a couple of guys crazy enough, just like me, to say, yeah, sure, we're in. That sounds great.
Yeah.
So, and I say the other thing is that each time, my wife asked me this recently, and I'm always, at least for the first few minutes before I realize what my day looks like, I'm happy to wake up. It's like, here I am again, right? And so it changes your perspective on a lot of those things. And the small things stop really mattering so much. It's the big things, and it really kind of focuses you. It focuses you in on what's important to you. And that for me is my wife and children, and then doing something that might leave a mark, you know?
Yeah, that is so good. You hear, and I've read, people who've had these kinds of experience, it's amazing how similar the way they describe it is. It's not about, I wish I would not have. It's
Yeah.
more about, I wish I would have.
Yeah.
And we live, you talked about fear. I mean, we really do. We live in just this constant state of anxiety, and what are other people thinking about me, and what if I
Right.
fail, and am I good enough, and all of that is just fear based, I think. And
Yeah,
I
I
love.
think that's 100% right. I agree with you on that. And I wouldn't say it's fear is in like, oh my gosh, there's a wolf outside my
Yeah,
door, right?
yeah,
It's fear of like what I'll call like the angles, right? Oh, there's a sharp angle on that. If I walk that way, I might bump into it and hurt myself, right? It's smaller stuff, but it's all that big, small stuff. It's not often you run into a wolf outside. So that's not a fear you're going to engage with every single day.
right,
It's small stuff. And you're right. Am I good enough? Am I, smart enough? Am I the best at this? Am I not the best? Whatever it might be. It's all that small stuff. And that's really what disappears. I don't want to meet a wolf outside my door, right? My dog, I have a couple big dogs, but that wolf will end up eating them, right? They can
yeah,
chase coyotes all day, but not a wolf.
yeah,
So I think that's what happens, right? That just flushes away. It's like, if I bump into that corner and get a bruise in my elbow, so what, right?
yeah,
I'm here to be bruised, right? So,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and it
No,
kind of
it's
gives
such
you
a
a little bit of
good, no,
a power.
it's such a good message. It really is about this, the stuff we worry about, the small stuff. And, it's really, as you've said many times in one way or the other, it's just mission. It's, pursuing something that requires my best. The
Yeah,
other thing too, I think about is, you're in the, um, and I'm with you, by the way. So when I butcher the way I'm going to say this, I'm talking about me too. But you're in sort of the back half of your career,
sure.
right? And you
Absolutely.
are absolutely excited about life. And that's very special, Paul.
It is. And it's, I don't, at one point, I was hoping to kind of cruise into retirement and do all of that stuff. And now I'm looking forward to skiing into retirement, right?
Yeah.
Whenever that takes place. Now it's not, I can't wait for this to kind of stop so I can retire. Now it's kind of like, well, I don't want to right now, right? I'm not even thinking that anymore. And it's more about, if willing, if this thing takes off and turns into a big company and everything, for me that's awesome, not because I can cash out and get a bigger house and this and that and everything else like that. It's like I can leave something to my kids, something bigger, something
Yeah.
that if they want to be part of it they can be, or if they want to cash it out and do their own thing, let them be,
Yeah.
have the lives that they want. So I look at it from that perspective. And, besides, I don't think my wife wants me to retire. That's an
Yeah.
awful lot of me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a lot of hanging around. Yeah, you're
Yep,
right.
it is.
Yeah, no,
It
it's a
is.
good thing. It's a good thing. No, I'm teasing, but really good. Paul, for folks, and who knows who will run across this podcast, if there's someone that's in higher ed, and I
Mhm.
would also say this, and maybe you'll correct me, but even someone who is maybe wants to be a part of something like this, and you have some special skill or some special talent that these tech startup companies might value, and you find yourself compelled by Paul's story, um, or if you're a university enrollment leader, where can folks find you? Where, and I'll put all this in the show notes too, but
Sure.
tell folks how they can get in touch with you.
Well, I have a LinkedIn page. It's Paul Mylott, Mylott. I can be reached I'm at Paul at Oblio.ai, which is the name of our company, Oblio. And you can reach me there. Feel free to reach out to me through email, texting, whatever method you prefer. And I'd love to hear from people. And yeah, if there's anyone out there who has use for Oblio or maybe has an idea for Oblio,
Hmm.
we are simply scratching the surface. We get asked all the time to move around. Can you start earlier in the funnel? Are you viable outside of higher education? All sorts of things. We have a lot of that. We get a lot of those questions. And, like I said, right now there's three of us, and we're doing a lot of work, but, we're open. I'd love to talk to people. I'd love to see what other ideas people may have for Oblio. I mean, it has a lot of use cases. I mean, we can't track them all down at this point because, like I said, we're small, but
Yeah,
it's a pretty amazing tool. It really is, and simple, and successful.
yeah. Well, it sounds very exciting, and I'm thrilled, really happy for you, and being a part of these tech labs, and just the exposure that I'm sure you've gotten from that. I mean, all signs are pointing in a really good direction. So very good. So
Yeah.
Paul, thank you very much for coming on. I really enjoyed, as always, catching up. And again, thanks for being on.
Well, thank you, Robin, and thanks for anyone who's hung out long enough to listen to an old guy like me.
Couple of old guys.
A couple of old guys. I appreciate that, and thank you for thoughtful and an enjoying conversation.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So.